You're listening to the OCD Stories podcast, hosted by me, Stuart Ralph. The OCD Stories is a podcast dedicated to raising awareness and understanding around obsessive-compulsive symptoms. I do this through interviewing inspired therapists, psychologists, and people who have experienced OCD. Welcome to the OCD Stories. And welcome to episode 369 of the podcast. And in this one, I got back on Nathan Peterson. Nathan is an OCD specialist who practices in Texas. And the reason I got him back on is to talk about emotional contamination OCD. Now, in particular, we get an update on him and what's been going on for him and his YouTube channel. What is emotional contamination themed OCD? Magical thinking, some of the obsessions and compulsions of this theme, exposure and response prevention therapy ideas and examples, working through resistance to treatment, how family and partners can support their loved one with this theme, words of hope, and much, much more. And thank you to NOCD for supporting the podcast. NOCD offers effective and convenient therapy available in the US and outside the US. To find out more about NOCD, their therapy plans, if they currently take your insurance, or to download their free app, head to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD stories, or the link will be in the episode description. And thank you to our new podcast partner, JS Health Vitamins. JS Health is an Australian wellness brand. Jessica Seppel is a nutritionist and founder behind JS Health, and also a dedicated listener to the OCD Stories podcast. In fact, she says it changed her life, and she found her therapist through our podcast, which she's been seeing for almost 3 years. Jess has always been very open about her mental health journey, including anxiety and pure OCD, and is passionate about opening up this conversation and supporting her community to feel healthy, happy, and confident. This level of care that Jess has is really what sets JS Health Vitamins apart. Their range of vitamin formulas are solution-focused, meaning they are designed to target your main health concerns and support a whole range of wellness goals. Created using some of the highest quality ingredients, backed by science at a therapeutic dose, that's what they are known for, verified by tens of thousands of real customers all around the world. And they are always GF and GMO free, made with ingredients you can trust to high Australian standards. They have given me an exclusive discount code for you all. Head to jshealthvitamins.com and use the code OCD Stories at checkout for a generous 15% off the entire range. You can also head to the show notes for all the info, including the discount code. So thank you to Jessica and JS Health for supporting the show. Thank you to Nate for his time. I deeply appreciate it. And of course, thank you to you guys for listening. It means a lot. And without further ado, here is Nate. Welcome back to the show, Nate.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you back on, and it's great to see all the good work you've been doing on YouTube and all the videos on the different themes and topics. So yeah, how's your YouTube been going for you?
It's great. You know, my original plan was to kind of cover everything that I could think of. Now that I've kind of done that, now it's trying to figure out, well, what else am I going to do with, there's so many different topics of OCD, but
that's true.
It's good. I'm really grateful for the support.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's great to see you get a good response. So today, we're going to talk about emotional contamination. I got you on because of one of your videos. So, and I'll link that in the show notes. So initially, what is emotional contamination?
Yeah. So we initially would think, contamination. So somebody who has that is worried about touching something, possibly getting germs or maybe sick. That's typically what we think about with contamination. Emotional contamination, you kind of think of, I guess, emotions internally, something that's inside them that they are feeling, and it just almost feels dirty. It almost feels like something is wrong, kind of like an uncomfortable feeling. And anyone that I've talked to that has this, to have them try to explain this feeling is really hard for them. It's like, it's just so uncomfortable. I don't know what it is, but I feel either almost dirty or, and it's connected to sometimes magical thinking, OCD as well, of I'm doing certain behaviors to make sure that I don't get this feeling inside, or I need to be pure or feel clean, whatever that feeling is. And so, an example could be somebody who, the key word that I usually look for is association. A lot of people make associations towards somebody else, or it could be an item, or it could be, something they even heard. It could be a word. Every time I hear a certain word, it's going to make me feel a certain feeling. And that feeling makes me feel gross or contaminated. And so then my job is to make sure I avoid everything related to that word, to make sure I don't get that feeling. And then that usually doesn't just stop there. It usually continues with more and more and more contaminants. And it can be just completely random as well of what it attaches to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for that. And is it fair to say, as you said, where you were trying to where you were referencing maybe some of your clients, and when they try and describe the feeling, and yeah, they can't necessarily describe it. It just feels contaminated or off. Or I've heard it as well, like just feel disgusted. As a so is that a common experience, that it's not just anxiety, it's maybe these other sort of feelings too that are driving it?
Yeah, absolutely. Typically with OCD, there's a lot of anxiety that individuals feel. And with something like this, there can be anxiety, but there's also that disgust kind of feeling that's there. And so I kind of just call that distress. They're feeling that distress in the moment. And it's interesting. I always want to get like, what is that? What is it that you're feeling? And they just have the hardest time explaining what it is. I just know I don't want it. Yeah. And yeah, I that's a good word for it, is probably that disgust that they're probably feeling.
Yeah. Thank you. So, as you explained a minute ago, traditional contamination OCD is obviously, maybe I saw someone touch something and I'm worried that they've got some kind of germ or virus or bacteria, or I just look at something and think it has the virus, germ, bacteria on it. With emotional contamination, can it also be where, let's say, dad's contaminated, and dad, but contaminated in an emotional sense, but now because he's touching everything, all this other stuff is contaminated, and if I touch the fridge, for example, I'm going to get that same contamination, but there's no presence of a worry of like disease or germs. It's generally like, what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It really loves to find people that they care about and attach it to that. So mom, for some reason it's moms a lot of the time that I see. Moms are contaminated, and dad is perfectly fine, or whoever else. But you're right that usually what I see is it's somebody, for some reason their brain said this person is now contaminated, and everything that they touch are things that you either don't use. So they use this kind of cup, you don't use that cup. They're wearing red today, so you don't wear red. If they sit at this table, you sit at this table. And, we would normally think, well, man, you just don't want to get sick. You don't want those germs. But, like we talked about, it's not really about that. I just don't want to get that uncomfortable feeling. But sometimes it can go into the realm of, that magical thinking. And so it can say, well, I know I've got a test that I'm taking today, and I know my mom didn't do really well on tests when she was in school, and I know she's wearing red today, so I better make sure I don't wear red, because if I wear red, I'm not going to do well on my test today. Yeah. It just can bounce around to make associations and connections in different ways.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. It's interesting what you said about mums mainly being the contaminant. In the work I've done with clients who have experienced this with the young people, it's usually mum and dad, and quite often dad has been more contaminated. So maybe it's a cultural thing, who knows?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And the problem is, if it does, I get, the magical thinking bit's really interesting, but then if it does become more physical, and I don't like it when mum or dad or my spouse or partner touches they're contaminated, but of course they're living in the same home. They're touching everything. So their world, I found, quickly becomes very restricted because there's very little that hasn't been touched or breached by the contaminated person.
Yeah. It usually individuals start creating their safe spaces, safe zones where the parent or whoever the contaminant is does not go in that room. Right? They've kind of trained them like, you do not come in this space. You do not touch these things. This is my shirt, or I do my own laundry, or whatever it is. Because you're right, their world does shrink and ends up getting pretty small. People feel so overwhelmed that it seems like the only option is just to detach from that person and either move away or just be somewhere else. But as we know, once they do that, it always finds something else.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that cliche saying of wherever you go, there you are. You can't run away from your head. Okay, so compulsions. What compulsions would we see with this form of contamination?
Yeah, usually the bigger compulsions obviously is avoidance. If I don't even have to be around whatever it is, I'm not going to feel the emotion. So a lot of times people stop watching different TV shows that might make them remember that, mom wears color red. I don't even want to see that color. Or it could be a certain word that somebody is saying, or, my roommate, didn't do really well in her test and she's watching this kind of show. I better not watch this kind of show. It could be social media. They stop doing words that they stop saying. I've met some, even just in my practice, that don't use many words because they've heard so many words that people use that they've associated with contamination that they're very careful and methodical with what's going to come out of their mouth because they want to make sure that they don't get that disgust feeling if they say the wrong word in that moment.
Yeah. Wow. So they literally restrict their use of words.
Yeah. In a big compulsion, sometimes I've seen even as somebody covering their mouth to make sure that a word doesn't come out, or they're really thinking about it. And if that word came into their brain that they didn't want to say, they have to fix it in their brain, almost like scrubbing the word, kind of like someone would wash their hands to get the contaminant away. They're somehow trying to do that, even just inside their brain. Someone I worked with called it brain soap. They got to get their brain soap going and cleanse it.
Wow, that's a good phrase. Yeah, I've seen a lot of hand washing too with this when it's become more physical. Mum and dad touching stuff. Even though, again, they're not worried about an actual disease or germ. It's just getting this feeling, as you said, that they can't describe of them. Which is weird that soap is able to cleanse that, because that doesn't make logical sense, but we know our OCD doesn't have to make any sense at all. Okay, so I guess I want to ask about exposure and response prevention therapy with this theme. And if there's any sort of case examples you could use to illustrate, if you're okay sharing, that would be great.
Yeah. So usually with the area that I go with exposure and response prevention is making sure that we kind of write down all the things that they're avoiding. And so sometimes a list can get pretty big, and we just keep adding to the list as time goes along. If it's mom and if it's this cup, the brain's really good at kind of cataloging everything that I'm going to remember, everything mom touched or dad touched. And so we're going to write down all those things and say, if you were to touch this, or if you were to do this, wear this color red, or if you were going to say red, red, red all day long, or whatever it is, how much distress or disgust would that bring to you? And just like a typical hierarchy, we kind of rank the fears a little bit, or the distress feeling. And for some people, they want to just start with the smallest and work their way up. And others, we're just like, it doesn't matter. We're going to go touch everything. We're going to go, write this word as many times as we can, or we're going to put sticky notes. I really like sticky notes. I have people write down different words of, gross or contaminated, or I love this feeling, to kind of change that response to it. Because I find that's the most important thing. It's not really touching the item and then just touching it. It's how can I respond to it completely different? Because just like anxiety, it's uncomfortable. People want to get it to go away. Same with this disgust. And so how can I kind of teach my body that I can actually tolerate this feeling and almost treat it as a false signal that's being sent? So if I keep reacting to this uncomfortable feeling and wanting to get it to go away, it's going to say, this is dangerous. And so instead, I usually have people kind of have that response of, yeah, this feeling's great. Like, I love it. I hope it stays all day long. I want to make sure that I keep touching all the red things. Anything with red today is my thing. And when that feeling happens, instead of oh, I can't believe that's here again. Now I have to do something to get it to go away. We have to change that response to almost like a celebration. I've had people even literally have party hats and kazoos in their pocket, and they celebrate that feeling came, so they can just teach their brain I do not care anymore. And when it comes to the magical thinking piece of it, we're willing to risk that maybe I won't do well on my test today. I don't know. Maybe something bad will happen because I'm wearing this color. We're willing to risk the uncertainties of it and see what happens, and know that all possibilities are possible. We're not looking for, oh, I did well on my test, and so there's not a threat, because we never know. You could still do poorly on a test, and we're willing to risk anything. I know a lot of times people worry about the far, far future that we say, well, mine's different because this has to do with my family or my kids or something way down the road. And so, but we're still willing to risk it because it's worth it right now. That's where life belongs. And that's what I work on as well with people, is we're living life here right now. And so let's do what we're going to do today. And whatever happens in the future, let's problem solve if there's a problem in the future. Yeah. And so let's feel uncomfortable for a while if we need to, and risk it. Yeah. And it's easier said than done, but it can be hard.
Yeah. Thank you for those answers. I really like the reframing of I want this. This is great. Yeah, I'm glad it's showing up again. Red's my favorite color, whatever it is. Yeah, I like that. And remind me again with the Post-its, how are you using those in terms of the reframe?
Oh yeah. So we're writing down and kind of putting them on all the contaminants that they can think of. And so every time they see it, either their job, depending on where they are in their treatment, either their job is to go up and touch the contaminant or say the phrase that's on there. Oh yeah, I love that cup. So glad my mom used it today. And red, yeah, I'm totally going to fail that test. That's awesome. Just to say, I don't care, whatever. Obviously they do care, but that's not really the point. OCD doesn't use logic very well. And so we're not really going to use logic back sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just, how can I respond this thing just really doesn't matter? And so, yeah, we might have sticky notes all over the place. And it's kind of just an indication of, let's not just do exposures during exposure time. Let's live this lifestyle of exposure. So as I'm walking around my house and I see it, I can do it actually all day if I want to, and make it worthwhile. So it's not just, I'm only doing during this little pocket of time, and then the rest of the time I get to do compulsions.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah, I really like that Post-it idea. I'm going to use it. Yeah, it's like you said, it's kind, you're showing a relevance to that part of the brain, or you're almost being sarcastic to it of, I love red, even though of course you don't in this case, but you're joking to a particular part of your brain, which is where the OCD is manifesting. Okay, so where's my next question? Oh yeah, you did actually before I asked you about the post-its, you did kind of allude to resistance. So when you said it's easier said than done, just to kind of go along with it. So with resistance, so with this theme, I've noticed maybe an increased amount of resistance to do exposure work, especially when the contaminant feels like it's everywhere. And I've heard before, this is mainly in teenagers, but like everything's an 8. Nothing's a 3, nothing's a 4, everything's an 8. And of course, when I say, well, let's start with an 8, they don't like that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, how do you work with that resistance? Maybe around this theme?
Yeah. I've kind of seen that even just with typical contamination, that like everything is high. Like I can't find something low to start with. And so what we typically do is sometimes kind of just get rid of the rating scale, and depending on if they're willing to do this, and we'll write down all the ideas and like throw them in a jar and just like pick one out and leave that. That's the uncertainty that we're using, is whatever. And we both agree on it. Whatever it is the thing we're working on. And we're not going to say, oh no, that one was so bad, I can't do that one. Sometimes we just try to take the value away from what's good and what's bad, or what's high or what's low, because we can get really stuck on that sometimes as well. And so if they're willing to do that, that's one of my favorite things is, man, I didn't know we were going to do this, but we're doing it today. And essentially try to put them all on the same level in a sense, and then work through it. That their brain automatically most of the time is going to say this one's easier than this one, but that kind of leaves it from taking it away from our choice of what it's going to be to just random chance. And if they're not willing to do that, then we kind of have to take a different approach of just, I've seen people do cotton balls to the contaminant, the mom's cup or the color red, and I'm going to hold the cotton ball. Like, is that just a teeny bit lower than actually touching it? Kind of feels like avoidance in a little way, but just to get someone to have just a little bit of a win and realize like, I can do this, sometimes just brings that motivation to just keep moving forward and work even harder at it. And if they can't do the cotton ball, sometimes it's the cotton ball to the cotton ball. And then we're on the second one. Now we're on the third one. Okay. And we're just spreading it, whatever it is. I, kind of thinking about that. I love when people can create like buddy exposures. It's kind of what I call them. Something that they can have with them everywhere. And so I think about this a lot with cotton balls, that I have people touch something with the cotton ball, and then that thing that is in their pocket all day long. Or we turn it into a necklace. We make a necklace out of it, and they wear it. And every time they feel that kind of distressing feeling, they hold on to that cotton ball or put their hand in their pocket and like, yes, I love this. This is so great. Love this feeling. I'm so glad this is here in my life. And just so they can get really used to just one thing, if that's what it needs to be at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like that. Yeah, thank you. That's good ideas. So are there any like sticking points to this theme that you've found that we should be aware of when trying to work with it?
Yeah, I've heard kind of different perspectives from different therapists and ideas. Some people have said that some of these associations can be related to like a traumatic experience that someone has had in their past. And so far in my practice, I haven't seen that, but I know other people have had that experience. Whether it's, something terrible happening to, their sister, or even them. And that, person was wearing a certain color. And so that it almost feels like PTSD in a way, but it's latched onto OCD, and it's no longer just an anxiety, disgust kind of feeling, but it's like my life is going to be horrible if I continue wearing this color because this horrible thing happened to me when I was wearing that color back in the day. And so I think that's something to kind of be aware of is, some people screen for that and look for, is there things that have happened in the past that have made you feel this way around whatever item or person this is. So kind of just being cognizant of that. And but either way, we still do the same treatment with it. One of the things that I guess kind of gets sticky for me when I'm working with this is the brain can make so many associations, and it feels like we're only just scratching the surface of, there's so many things that if we just like put them all in a barrel and just say it's all the same, kind of like we said, like we don't have 100 items that we need to go touch. Like we're working on OCD. It's not really about the contamination, or it's not really about the disgust feeling. Like we're just changing the way OCD is thinking and retraining the brain. And so it's not about, all these things that I have to do. It's just, how can I retrain my brain today? And just taking it into a really, really simple step. More than I'm touching the water bottle, I'm retraining my brain. And that's the way I try to reframe it for people. And so sometimes the process goes quicker when we can do something like that.
Yeah. Good ideas again. Thank you. So whether it's parents involved, whether it's a partner, spouse, husband, wife, whoever, how can these people support their loved one with OCD with this theme, especially when this theme is kind of focused on the loved one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they often are involved in treatment quite a bit, because if they're the contaminant, then we want them part of their life and part of their treatment. So often individuals will come into the office with them if they'll allow that. Or we'll do some type of virtual session for a little bit and work on kind of what the parent's role is. Sometimes parents want to take an all or nothing kind of approach. I either do all the accommodation for you and I don't touch anything, or I just say, whatever, I'm going to do whatever I want. And really, we try to make it, let's be where the client is in the moment. So if we're working on, the color red, because we keep bringing that up, but if we're working on the color red, then mom, this is your role, or dad, like we are not accommodating with red anymore, or your job is to make sure you keep wearing that, or make sure that your daughter or whoever needs to wear that as well. That's the category right now that you don't accommodate with. And sometimes that's hard because it's like, we don't want them to accommodate anything, but we got to be where the client is in the moment. And if that's what we need to do at the beginning, that's what we do. And eventually they realize that hopefully I don't have to accommodate much or any at the end of treatment, because they've kind of learned their role. I know it's being patient with the person going through this, because it's hard to kind of wrap our head around, like, well, who cares? Like, who cares? Just touch it or whatever it is. But it's just knowing that like they're feeling something so different that we can't even explain or even comprehend. And so I think it's giving them some grace for wanting that reassurance again, or wanting to accommodate, because like life is already difficult as it is. And to add this on top of it, it's just another component that is hard. And so we got to give them some grace for living life and doing everything that they're doing. And even if they give into compulsions sometimes, to just be like, okay, I get you. Like, sorry for your day today and what you're going through. Like, is there anything we can learn from these experiences maybe for the future? Like, I'd like to frame everything into kind of a learning opportunities more than like shame and guilt. Like, what can I learn from these moments? And I love when people write things down, because they're more likely to achieve whatever their goals are. And if they're say, okay, I took this experience. Tomorrow, when I encounter this color or this association, this is what I'm going to try to do with it. And maybe I don't do well with it tomorrow. So then what am I going to do about it the next day? We just keep learning. Yeah. And so parents hopefully get with a therapist and they can kind of guide you through, this is your role for the week. And the next week, this is your role for the week. And we stick to that. Even if there's tantrums and there's this time's different, it's sticking to it because it's hard. The parents' role is to make sure their family's feeling good and happy and taken care of. And so it's hard to see a loved one suffer.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. So is there anything else on emotional contamination that you want to share that we haven't discussed?
I know for me, I think each person's going to be individual in the way that they need to do that response piece of exposure and response prevention. Some people really love I am gung-ho and I love this feeling. This is great. This is wonderful. And I think some other people need to actually just feel the emotion and not make light of it. Each person's going to respond differently to it. And so it's knowing that there isn't this is the right approach. You always have to make sure you make light of the situation. And I know some therapists are really on that. You need to feel the emotions. You need to be in the moment. Try not to put judgment to it. Nothing is good or bad. It just is what it is. And using a lot of maybe nots. I think I got the sign up here, but it's maybe nots of, I'm willing to just accept that I don't know the future and I can be in this feeling and know at the end of it all that I'm going to hope that everything's okay at the end of it all. And so I guess thinking about that, for therapists who are working with different people, that they might need a specific approach that didn't work for the other person or did work, and it's kind of knowing what do they like the best. And each person needs to, just respond a little bit differently, possibly to these situations. And the cool part is I do see that disgust feelings start to reduce in people, which is really neat. And it kind of shows us this was a false signal kind of this whole time. It's making you feel this feeling that is, we always think of anxiety and kind of these error messages that are being sent. I think of this disgust as the same. This is just an error message that's being sent and make me feel something I don't need to feel. And so I'm willing to feel it to show my body that I am okay. I can feel it and still survive, keep moving forward and risk whatever my brain says I'm risking.
Yeah. Brilliant summation. So I guess words of hope for people with this theme.
Yeah, people can get better. I think that's the cool part. This is one of those themes where it can feel very, very hopeless. That it seems like the only option, like I said, is detach, get away from all these things. But that's not living life. And it's so worth it to do treatment and do it the correct way. The correct way meaning let's do these exposures and risk it. Sometimes people don't know where to start, and it's really just pick one thing that you are avoiding and make that be your best friend for a while until you get so bored of that one thing and you felt all the emotions from it and you don't feel it as much or at all. And then we move on to the next thing. And now it's everything yellow. And now it's this word. And now I'm watching movies all day long about this thing or whatever it is. We can have fun with exposures, but it's there is hope. And I think that's the cool part. Obviously medications help with some of this as well, that it's kind of takes some of the work away from them, but it helps them feel this emotion just a little bit differently and more motivation towards doing treatment. So that's something to not completely dismiss. I know it's hard to think about medications sometimes for different people.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. So you got a billboard. I would have asked you this one before, but you got a billboard. What do you want written on it?
Man, I've heard you ask this question before. I think it's just being kind and giving people grace. Like, I'm one of those people that just, I don't know. I love to help people. I love when people give others the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's what it is. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Usually it's the first thought that comes in our head when we're feeling big emotions. Usually that first thought is incorrect. And we just go completely off that first thought. And if we took a moment to step back and say, maybe that person that cut me off on the road is like headed to the hospital. Who knows? Maybe they're just having a really bad day. Maybe their turning signal is broken. Who knows? Like, let's come up with other alternatives than the first thought that comes in our head. And I feel like our world would be so much better if we looked at people in a different way.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. So everyone listening, we can be the start. Nice. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing this your expertise on this topic. Like I said before we started recording, it's not something I've covered in any detail on the podcast, so it's great to finally do so.
Yeah, I appreciate you thinking of me and bringing me on here, because I love talking about OCD. It's my thing.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. And thank you to our Patreons who helped make this episode possible. And if you would like to find out more about Patreon and the rewards and benefits, then there will be a link in the episode description. If you enjoy the OCD Stories podcast and would like to support us with a one-time tip/donation, please go to theocdstories.com/support. All tips, no matter how large or small, are greatly appreciated. Please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to the podcast. And thank you to JS Health. And if you would like to get 15% off their entire range, head to jshealthvitamins.com and use the code OCD Stories at the checkout. The link will be in the episode description. And thank you to NOCD for supporting our work. If you want to find out more about NOCD, head to go.treatmyocd.com/the-OCD stories or click the link in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.